All right, finna go ahead and get it started. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Life of a Champ podcast. For today's episode 193, we're going to be discussing the difference between balanced people and depressed people. So now this is going to be one where I feel like I'm going to lay out a bunch of different things, and I kind of want to get your guys' input. So make sure you go ahead and tap in and leave a comment, whether you're rewatching this or watching this live. I want to know your guys' input for sure. So getting into it, I do want to go ahead and start this by saying make sure to go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, and on Rumble at Life of a Champ podcast for every single platform. And also make sure to tap in with my YouTube shorts as well as my YouTube clips because I'll be posting more of those here soon as well. So tap in with that as well. Getting into it, I want to lay out this concept that I was introduced to within one of my last live streams. So if you have never seen me on a live stream reacting to some videos, make sure to tap in with that for sure. I've been doing that recently, so that has been definitely something worth watching in my opinion. I've been just reacting to podcasts and just entertainment that I get educated from. So like I said, just basically just really good podcasts, and I'm gonna be eventually reacting to just like regular videos and stuff like that. So if that does interest you, make sure to tap in with that for sure. But there was this one concept that I found to be one of the most profound um, pieces of the podcast um, when I was watching the Hams and Chris Williamson podcast. They were just generally discussing this one concept where there was basically three sides to this one guy, and essentially three sides to every person that people really need to pay attention to. And these three sides were the dopamine version of yourself, the serotonin version of yourself, and the cortisol version of yourself. So each of us have all three of these within us, and I do believe it is our responsibility to go ahead and compartmentalize the activities that we have, or not necessarily activities, but compartmentalize the actions that we take into one of these three categories, so we know exactly what we're kind of diving into before we get into it. So, um, so for example, right, the dopamine version of us is probably going to be the things that maybe aren't the most fruitful things that we can do, but yet we do them because they bring us some type of enjoyment. And maybe a lot of this time it's not necessarily something that is, let's just say, worthwhile always. Like, yeah, so for example, maybe let's just say you're trying to maintain eating a healthy diet. Maybe this will look like eating some unhealthy food, right? Maybe getting into some sweets, maybe eating an excessive amount of sugar, right? That would be hitting the dopamine version of yourself. That would be a dopamine related action. Or maybe this looks like you spending excessive time on your phone as opposed to just reading a book or doing another activity that maybe isn't going to give you as much of a thrill or an excitement, but therefore it can reap you some benefits beyond that for sure, or beyond that moment for sure. Some of these things for me personally is like I said, watching videos, going on Instagram and Snapchat, same thing that I just mentioned. Seeing the views go up as well. I've been posting a lot more frequently, and seeing the views go up has definitely been something that definitely is that version, or like I pay attention to it, or I'm a little bit more like ultra conscious of that instead of paying attention to just the process in itself, right? Enjoying making the content, because realistically, what I clip is parts of this podcast, right? And with that being said, I can't necessarily I enjoy making the podcast, right? And I never want to get away from that, and I never want to do something that's going to take away from the enjoyment of the podcast, right? Um, and that potentially can be, like I said, paying attention to the views instead of paying attention to, like I said, what it takes. I think can definitely hinder a lot of people for sure. Or maybe this is the occasional drink or the occasional smoke, right? Or maybe this is getting off task, right? That could be that could be the dopamine version. Let's just say that, yeah, the dopamine version of myself. All right. And then there is, like I said, another aspect of this would be the serotonin version of myself, or like I said, serotonin version of yourself. And like I mentioned, right, within all these things, I want you to go ahead and specifically define when you're doing a certain action, what does this look like? Or like I said, what I did for myself is the dopamine version of myself. I wrote up a bunch of things where I'm like, this is definitely dipping into maybe the instant gratification, or maybe something that's really not as good for me, but therefore I'll do it occasionally, right? Or I'll try to limit it as much as I possibly can for many reasons, which I will discuss here soon. But like I mentioned, the serotonin version of yourself, for me personally, this is going to look like being a man of character and doing things that bring me wholesome enjoyment of life that aren't these, that isn't really this instant gratification. And this is going on a walk with my girlfriend, hanging out with my boys, maybe getting a good workout, maybe doing some deep work, which is like I said, maybe editing or doing a podcast, right? Maybe this looks like helping one of my friends or maybe helping one of my family members develop a skill. Maybe this will look like playing basketball, right? Basketball is a huge passion of mine, and yeah, that definitely could be one as well. And then also just just having good, wholesome conversation that allows me to develop my mind while also helping another person develop their own mind, right? Those are going to be things that, in my opinion, are being a man of character. And with that being said, obviously we can kind of see where we kind of want to be at, as opposed to where we could be at for sure. And then the last one, of course, like I said, make sure you're clear with this for yourself as well. This is going to be the cortisol version of myself, right? This is going to be dealing with the pressures of life, or maybe focusing on the pressures of life, or being ultra self-critical about myself, or like I said, just being consumed by the stressors of life, right? Allowing my focus to essentially detour into what I would deem to be more of a depressive, stressful state, right? And so, like I said, those are the three components of your personality. Those are the three components of the actions that you go ahead and take. So, like I had mentioned, right, observe your daily actions. Within your daily actions, what would those certain actions, what would they better align with? Would they better align with your serotonin version of yourself, which, like I said, for me personally, like I said, you need to define this for yourself, but this is just being a man of character, doing things that give you wholesome enjoyment of life, right? Or maybe it dips into the dopamine version of where, you probably shouldn't do it as much, and you're probably limited as much as you possibly can, and maybe you're not um, too good at self-governing yourself, so this can take over your entire life, and you'll be only doing these things. And as well with that, right? Or maybe it's the cortisol version of yourself, which is going to be, like I said, just dealing with the stressors of life, being anxious, being depressed, being, I would say, just filled with negative emotion, and just dealing with the stressors of life, which of course is going to come up. And all of these things should be well balanced. But quite frankly, what I see is this: there's very, very few people that I've met where I can see within their character, and not only within their character but their choice of action, where they're having a healthy balance of each of these things, or maybe, and like I said, also defining what is a healthy balance between these things, right? And I'll go and get into that right now in a minute. But one thing I want to mention that I think is very, very, very interesting, and this is not exclusive to this, but this is just an observation that I had made. Is I believe that you can only get cortisol from doing dopamine, or not. You can get cortisol, like I said, the cortisol, which is like the stressor, right? Essentially, you can dip into that when you have when you decide to express the dopamine version of yourself in excess, right? So, for example, right? Let's just say I like to just use this example. Let me see if I can use another one. Let's just say what brings you instant happiness is playing video games. It gives you instant happiness. It gives you a sense of, accomplishing something, gives you a sense of progress, right? Fine. Okay. But you know that you probably should be doing something else. You know that there's probably something that you could do, another habit that you could do, or maybe you need to do something, like literally something else. There's like a higher thing on the priority list, but playing video games really just gives you that instant happiness, and it feels good to play video games. So you neglect what you have to do, and you decide to do what you want to do, right? You decide to go ahead and enjoy this. You decide to go ahead and act in line with the dopamine version of yourself, right? When you decide to go ahead and do that, you start to neglect the things that you know you need to do, right? And when you decide to neglect the things that you know you need to do, it becomes a conflict of value within your own internal self, which is going to give you more worry, which is going to allow you to dip into the cortisol version of yourself, which is dealing with the stressors of life, in short, right? So like I said, I just found that to be an interesting observation, and that is something that I think is part of the reason why people stay depressed, right? Everybody has depressed moments of their life, right? There's things that happen. There's things that happen within this life that are less than ideal and maybe out of your control, right? But to stay in a depressed state is a choice of action. Is a choice. Yeah, I really think it's a choice of action. It is what you're placing your focus on, right? So, like I had mentioned, right? Just observe the actions of people around you. I'm going to lay out a common thing that I see within most people, right? Within most people, they only really have two things that they go ahead and deal with. They're simply controlled by the things in which give them the happiness, the dopamine, right? They're simply controlled by those things. That's all they choose to go ahead and do. That's all they prioritize, right? And when they prioritize that, like I had mentioned, right, they know that they need to take care of other things. They know that they potentially have other goals within the back of their mind, but they do not act in accordance to those goals. So therefore, they start dealing with the cortisol version of themselves. And they only really have those two things, and they necessarily can't find the balance. So it's a vicious cycle, right? You're stressed, right? Life is going to give you stressors, right? You're going to be stressed. Okay, what is the one thing that these people think is going to relieve their stress? What can I do to make me temporarily happy right now? So they'll do something that makes them happy. Maybe they'll overindulge within eating, or maybe they'll have a few more desserts, or maybe they will start to play video games, or maybe they will do just something that you could be doing something potentially better, right? They'll go ahead and indulge within that thing, right? And then because they did that, life gets hard, so therefore they still have that stressors, and and then obviously from there, right? Oh, they start to get stressed. Oh, what's a better thing to do than to do a thing that makes you happy? And you see how it's this vicious cycle, right? But what you must understand is the people who are well balanced, they have found out how to properly balance the dopamine, the cortisol, and um, the cortisol, and the serotonin version of themselves, right? So, like I said, what brings you wholesome enjoyment and fulfillment within this life, right? What are the actions that you can take where after you do this, you feel like a better person for doing that, right? Like I mentioned, I gave you some of my examples. Maybe this looks like getting a good workout. Maybe this looks like doing the work that you know you need to do and stop necessarily procrastinating on the work that you know you need to go ahead and do, right? And along with this, right, what are you doing and what are you placing your focus on? Are you placing your focus on the dopamine version of yourself, where you're simply just doing the things that you want to go ahead and do because it makes you happy? And quite frankly, that's not how life works. Doing the things that only make you temporarily happy is going to give you the highest of highs and also the lowest of lows of life, right? Or at least it potentially can, right? But if you're pursuing what I deem to be the most important of those three rather, which is going to be the serotonin version of yourself, it's going to allow you to have the more of that fulfillment. And like I mentioned, right? Or no, I haven't mentioned this yet. If you observe a person who's well balanced and a person who is depressed, really the only difference is their choice of focus and their choice of action. That's literally it. That's literally it, right? And of course, there's going to be external circumstances that can come up, which is going to put maybe a balanced person or more of a balanced person in a depressive state. But I do believe that it is a temporary thing, and then eventually, even the most balanced people can find their ways to be balanced again, even if they're unbalanced, right? Like I said, life is not always about being 100% balanced, right? Because that's not really realistic, right? But what is realistic is trying to find the balance and striving to have the balance in your life, right? And like I said, doing these few things, right? Like I said, you need to define what this is for you. And if you don't have enough of these things, because maybe you're choosing too much dopamine things, then you need to reconstruct your life. You need to change up your actions. You must evaluate your mental state based off of the things that you do. Because quite frankly, most of the time, the way that you feel is in direct correlation to the things in which you do. And if you're not choosing the right actions, or if you're only choosing the actions I would suggest that makes you the happiest that you possibly can be, maybe maybe there's something better that you potentially can do. And like I mentioned, just to simply observe the actions of a person who's more well balanced, maybe in a better mental state, right? What are the things that they go ahead and do that allows them to maintain that? As opposed to a person who is depressed, there's certain things that I've noticed that depressed people go ahead and do, and there's certain things that I've noticed that well balanced people go ahead and do, right? It's not necessarily this big mystery of why people are in the state of in the mental state that they're in, right? This isn't necessarily something that should be just like, oh, I wonder why they're this way, or I wonder why. And I see like a lot of people who are depressed or who have they're in a depressive state. They're like they make it seem like being balanced is the most elusive thing that ever existed, and this is something that is not necessarily attainable, right? Like I said, simply point out what's the difference between these people, right? You need to be a good enough observer of life to understand that um there's certain reasons for these things. There are truly certain reasons for these things, and if you're attentive enough, and if you're attentive enough and you're smart enough to go ahead and implement the things that well balanced people go ahead and do, then you're going to be a more well balanced person, and you're going to avoid yourself from the lowest of lows of life. All right. Give me 1 second. If you guys have any comments or questions regarding today's episode, or maybe there's something that you feel like I haven't mentioned yet, I want you to go and let me know in the comments. All right. Give me 1 second. Let's see how far I went. And another thing I want to mention with this as well. This is something that I thought to be one of the most interesting things when it comes to just analyzing depression and people who are depressed, right? Which is a question that I had gotten from Jordan Peterson. If you don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he's a person that I would recommend you go ahead and watch. But I was watching one of the videos that he was talking about depression, and the most profound question that I've ever heard him ask was, "Do you have depression, or do you just have a terrible life?" Right? And his argument was, most people truly just have a terrible life, and of course you're going to feel negative emotions because, quite frankly, it's warranted. But it's also fixable. There's also certain adjustments that you can go ahead and make, and you won't be feeling the ways in which you do. But it really all goes back down to your action that you go ahead and take on a daily basis. Are you acting in line with your values, or are you simply just doing the things that you want to go ahead and do? Are you living within that state of a serotonin, or are you living within that state of yourself that is more of the dopamine, right? And that is simply pretty much the difference, right? So ask yourself the question, right? Do you have a terrible life? Is there certain things that you can go ahead and change, that you know you can change, that are within your control, that would allow you to be in a better mental state? Or are you actually depressed? Whatever that looks like. Like I said, I don't necessarily believe that. I don't believe depression is something that is a forever thing, and it shouldn't be a forever thing, and it should be perceived as something that is just a temporary state of being. Like I said, you can be depressed, but you shouldn't have depression, right? Simply analyze your actions. There's something wrong. It is a key. If you're feeling that specific way, and like I said, I'm not saying this is going to fulfill within all. Um, this isn't going to be. This isn't going to say for all circumstances of people who are depressed. This is why they're depressed, right? But I'm gonna say for a lot of people who are depressed, they simply just have a terrible life. They simply could just make certain adjustments, and their life would automatically be better. That are literally within their control, right? It's very few and far between where somebody's depressed and there's not something that they can change, or there's not something that they can go ahead and act on, or there's not something that they can go ahead and focus on that would make them in a better mental state, right? I just don't see that as as something that just like can exist, right? And like I said, you must analyze where you placing your focus and what are you acting on, right? Those two things are going to be essentially setting you up for either failure or success. Failure or success, depending on the way that you feel, right? I would say a successful person is going to be a person who's definitely going to be in a better mental state, right? It doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter how much status you have. If you're not in a good mental state, quite frankly, you're a loser, in my opinion. You're not successful, in my opinion, right? That's just according to my own definition of success, which is something that I would also recommend for you to go ahead and define for yourself for sure. And another thing with this, and I do believe I did hear this from Jordan Peterson as well, and this is something worth considering as well. People who are depressed, they're not necessarily striving for anything better than their current situation. They're either in one to two situations, super locked into the present, where since their present self isn't the most ideal self, so therefore they feel some type of way about their life, or they're stuck in the past, for the better, or no, not even for the better, for the worse. They're just stuck in the past, and with being stuck in the past, it is not allowing you to place enough focus on the present. Therefore, not allowing you to place enough emphasis on the future and how the future will turn out, right? They don't believe they don't believe their future circumstances will be within their favor, or they're not within their necessary control, right? So the question I have for you is this, right? Are you aiming towards a better life? Are you acting in accordance to what a better life in the future would look like? And the people who are the more than likely the people who are depressed, they usually don't. They usually, which goes back to what I mentioned earlier, they're cashing out right now. They're doing and being in a line with the dopamine version of themselves, which is basically saying, you know what, man, I'm not feeling the best, but what I know what can help get me up to where I need to be. I'm gonna play video games. I'm gonna eat this junk food, right? I'm gonna do all the things that maybe not, they're not the best for me, but quite frankly, they're gonna make me happy right now. And that's all they do. And like I said, it's a vicious cycle. They're either super happy because they're doing something that's going to bring them that temporary happiness, or they're super in a negative state, and the only way to get them out of that negative state is to get the next hit of dopamine, which is whatever to them, right? Um, but like I said, they don't have a balance. They're not pursuing things that's going to make them a person of character, right? That's going to give them a fulfilling life. That's going to necessarily give them an aim worth striving for, right? They don't believe the future will be better, right? They don't believe the future has potential to be better. And quite frankly, everyone that does exist, when it comes down to it, if you're doing what you need to go ahead and do on a daily basis, the future will be better. It has no other choice but to be better, but that's only if you're acting in accordance in the present moment. If you're acting in accordance in the present moment of the actions that would give you a benefit in the long term, right? So, for example, working out is a huge one that if you just did that and eventually you start to see progress, you're going to be in a better mental state. Regardless of who you are, regardless of your circumstance, that's going to make you feel better. I'm not saying it's going to be the solution to all of your problems. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that's at least one aspect of life that is worth pursuing. That is something that can be improved upon. That is within your control if you have the resources and if you're acting in accordance to the resources that you should be acting on. Yeah, like I said, it's pretty much as simple as that. So where are you placing your focus? What are you acting on, and what side of you are you acting on? Right? Are you acting on the dopamine version of yourself? Are you acting on the cortisol version of yourself? Are you acting on the serotonin version of yourself? Because those things are going to dictate the ways in which you feel, and I would say it's very much as simple as that. And I want to mention this as well. And I find this, like I said, I find this to be the most interesting, right? Good things make the suffering feel worth it. But that's only if you have the suffering. And like I said, the suffering is going to make the good feel better and earned. So if you're suffering to an extent and you're doing something that's good, like I said, this can either be for the best or for the worst, right? If you're suffering, the goods can potentially feel better or feel earned. But you also must define and must be very intentional and must be very cautious of what that good feeling is, right? Because here's the thing: if you place value on the wrong thing, if you emphasize and act on the emphasis of something that's not necessarily the best thing for you or within your best future interest, then quite frankly, like I said, you're only going to be leaning on the dopamine version of yourself, which necessarily does not have the future's best intent in mind, or you're going to be relying on the cortisol version of yourself. Really, there's no in between. So the more you stay within the serotonin version of yourself, which is going to be, like I said, bringing you the most fulfillment of this life, right? Doing the things that make the world go away for a second, right? For me, for example, that is basketball. Me playing basketball, it allows me to be so present and in the moment. And the only thing I'm focused on is the game, right? This allows me to be ultra present. It brings me fulfillment. It has been a thing that has always worked for me as long as I could remember, right? And hopefully you have one of these things. Maybe it's painting for you. Maybe it's drawing. Maybe it's whatever brings you some fulfillment, right? Whatever fills up your cup, man. But here's the thing, not doing those things that you know fills up your cup, that fill up your cup, that's a mistake. Truly, that's a mistake, right? Another one of those things would be getting a good workout. You can't beat a good workout, right? Another one of those things is having a good conversation, right? Taking care of one of my loved ones, right? Can't beat it, man. You can't beat it. Those things are the best things of life. And the more you can lean into that serotonin version of yourself, the better off you're going to be. And like I said, just finding a balance, because quite frankly, you're still going to have the dopamine version of yourself, right? You're still going to have those things, but quite frankly, they need to be limited. They need to be limited, or you'll take advantage of them, and they'll take advantage of you. More importantly, right? If you're doing the things that you only want to go ahead and do, it's only a matter of time before you've taken advantage of those things. And like I had mentioned, those things take advantage of you as well. They take advantage of the present moment. They begin to destroy you. They begin to feel so good, and they also begin to destroy you in the same breath, which is definitely something that is absolutely mind blowing. But I've seen it within my own actions. I've seen it within the actions of people around me. I've seen it. I've just like I said, just it doesn't take a genius to see these observations that I'm mentioning, right? So like I said, maybe the homeless person the homeless person on the side of the road, right? I guarantee their focuses in life are two things. Just observe this. This is simple. This is a good example right here. A person who's homeless, their focus is on two things. One, the dopamine version of themselves. Whatever's going to give them the next high. Maybe this is actual drugs. Maybe this is, I don't know what homeless people do, what I do know is their choices of actions have led them to the position in life that they're in, for the better or for the worse. But quite frankly, they're either trying to focus in on the next thing that's going to make them happy, which, like I said, or which, like I mentioned on previous podcasts before, focusing solely on happiness is probably one of the most unwise things you can do. You must focus and prioritize fulfillment above happiness, because at least fulfillment can last, and happiness is fleeting, right? The people that pursue happiness when happiness is a fleeting feeling has no choice but to put themselves back in the cortisol state of mind anyways. Because quite frankly, life is not always going to be good, and life is not always meant to be good. That's the harsh reality of life. And I'm sure you know that. But quite frankly, there's a lot of people that act like that doesn't exist, right? The highest thing that they have on their value hierarchy is happiness. And when they're not happy, guess what? Life fucking sucks, right? But here's the thing, if you're pursuing fulfillment, if you're in the serotonin state of mind and acting in accordance to that, you are already experiencing objectively the highest of highs of life. Like I said, taking care of your loved ones. What's better than taking care of people that you love? What's better than getting a good workout? What's better than helping somebody develop a skill? What's better than that? There's truly nothing better than that. And like I said, you just must understand, and maybe you even need to reframe what is good for you and what is not good for you, right? And like I said, have a balance with these things, man. Truly have a balance with these things. Because if you don't, like I mentioned, right, suffering only feels good when you get rewarded for the suffering. Good things only feel truly good when you do suffer. That's just what it comes down to. Because at the end of the day, too much good and not enough suffering, you take advantage of the good or abuse it. That's just what it is. And also, like I mentioned, right, too much suffering and not enough good makes the suffering or sacrifice not feel as worth it. And that's just what it comes down to, right? If you're simply, it's like this. It's like this, for example, right? Let's just say you're a really, really disciplined person, and of course there's going to be a lot of perks of being a disciplined person, right? But let's just say you never do anything you never do anything that you want to do, and you're always ultra self-disciplined, right? That's going to be good, but quite frankly, I don't believe up to this point in my life, if you're not doing some some of the things that would dip into that side of the dopamine side of version of yourself, I don't believe you're getting the full squeeze out of life. I do believe that you should be placing 70 to 80 to 90% of your time in the serotonin version of yourself, which is going to probably be in the self-discipline version of yourself. But like I had mentioned, you must be balanced. And the way that you can be the most balanced is to be able to have what is the maximum amount of enjoyment of life that you can get with also doing the minimum amount of things that give you dopamine? Think about that for a second. That, in my opinion, is one of the best questions that I've asked on today's episode. Because there is a certain threshold, right? You don't necessarily need to be always doing all the things that just make you the happiest person ever. I know that's mind blowing to today's society because, quite frankly, people pedestalize happiness. Like I said, happiness comes and goes, right? I'm not gonna pedestalize it, right? Everybody loves being happy, but like I said, it's fleeting feeling. It's not going to last. And with that being said, I don't think people should necessarily be ever too high or too low, right? Never be high, never be too high, never be too low. Because quite frankly, if you're too high or too low, it's almost as if you don't understand how this life goes. Because life's going to give you the dips. Life's going to also give you the mountains of life, right? And to be attached or to be pedestalizing one over the other when understanding that this is just a human experience is to be missing something, right? Because you shouldn't solely focus on being happy or striving to only be happy. And you shouldn't only focus on being depressed or striving to get away from that feeling. Because, like I said, the human experience is packed with all of these emotions and is meant to be filled or meant to be felt. And for you to not feel or try to neglect some of the feelings that come with this life experience is for you to be rejecting the human experience in its totality. And that's not real. That's just not real. That's just not smart. That's just not practical, in my opinion. And with that being said, understand, like I said, just understand the concept of never be high, never be too high, never be too low. Because if you are, you have a missing perspective. If you're too low, you have a missing perspective because you know there will be better days ahead, and you must understand that thoroughly, right? There's a lot of people that can get trapped in the too low aspect, and maybe it'll last, maybe what will last a day for me or 2 days for me will last 2 or 3 weeks for another person. But like I said, I have a full perspective. I have a full perspective that this will not be something that is forever, right? Same thing when I'm the most happy. I understand thoroughly that I enjoy this right now, but I understand that this won't last. I'm not clinging on to the happiness. I'm not clinging on to this because I understand that it is fleeting. Enjoy it when it's here and move on. Simple as that, man. I'm not clinging on to it. I'm not pedestalizing it because, like I said, then you get in. Like I said, then like if you're not happy, life fucking sucks. Especially if you're pedestalizing, especially if you value happiness over everything. And here's the thing: I've never seen anybody that pedestalizes happiness over everything and is they're not. They're, I never want to be like that person, right? The people who pedestalize happiness over everything, those are the people who either underweight, overweight. Like I said, they're not the physical representation of something that I want to go ahead and be like, right? Ever, literally ever. They don't. Like I said, I just don't know if they have the values calibrated, and it's as simple as that, right? I just don't know if you have your values truly calibrated. I don't know if you understand people that pedestalize happiness over everything. Like I said, even over fulfillment. I don't necessarily think that you've not experienced enough life to understand, and that's just what it is, in my opinion. But getting into the next thing, let me make sure I've checked off everything though. And yeah, I like this as well. This is something that I haven't mentioned yet. If you're going to do dopamine, if you're going to choose a dopamine action, right? Um, just anything, right? Just if you're gonna dip into that side of yourself, I would say it's probably best to parlay it with something that is going to give you that serotonin, right? They're going to give you like going to put you in that serotonin state of mind, like I'd mentioned earlier, right? Um, and that would make it more worth it, and especially if it's something that is maybe like not within the best interest of you, right? It would probably be best in your it'd be within your best interest to do it at least um with doing a productive action or doing it with something that is going to truly give you some actual fulfillment in this life instead of just going to give you this quick happiness, this quick hit of happiness. um you're gonna be better off to parlay that together for sure, because if not, Like I said, of course, I always do the dopamine stuff too, man. Like I said, I'm not no greater than you are, but at the very least, I'm very, very conscious of it when I go ahead and do these things, and I'm very, very limiting of it, because I know that there are better things that I can go ahead and do with my time. There are better things that I can go ahead and act on, and especially if I'm not acting on these things, if I'm not acting on the things that put me in the serotonin state of mind, then I already know the vicious cycle that I'm on. I'm going to be doing things that I only want to go ahead and do, and I'm going to be neglecting the values that I have. And by neglecting the values that I have, it's going to put me into the cortisol state of mind. I'm going to be more stressed. I'm going to feel like the world is terrible, and I'm not going to feel that very good about myself. And that's just what it is, man. It's a vicious cycle, man. Get yourself out of the cycle by recognizing that you're in a cycle. These cycles of life exist, and they're all dictated on what you focus in on, and also what you act upon as well. Make the suffering feel worth it by not always cashing out on the things that put you in the dopamine state of mind, right? Define these things for yourself. Like I'm gonna go ahead and break it down one more time before I go and end it off. The dopamine version of myself is going to look like watching videos or watching only entertainment or going on my phone excessively, maybe going on Instagram, maybe going on whatever, right? Or maybe seeing the views go up, right? I'm a YouTuber, seeing the views go up. Or maybe this would look like I said, an occasional drink and an occasional smoke. Or maybe this will look like just getting off task, right? Being distracted, maybe procrastinating. These are all things that give you dopamine to an extent, right? Whether you'd like to admit it or not. But like I said, what does that look like for you? What are things that you do that you know you maybe shouldn't do? Like I said, maybe this is eating unhealthy, right? But you do it because it feels good. But like I had mentioned, right, it's not always about doing what feels good. That's just what it is, right? And then, like I mentioned, then you with the dopamine version, you also have what is the most ideal, in my opinion, the serotonin version of yourself, which to me personally is truly being a man of character. And all, like I said, with being a man of character, developing that character along the way with people that you love. This would look like going on a walk with my girlfriend, hanging out with my boys, getting a good workout in, doing the work that I know that most people neglect, helping people in my life develop certain skills, playing basketball, having good conversation. Those are the things that truly give you what I deem to be the highest of highs of life. And maybe there's certain things that when I'm mentioning these things, certain things that you do that I haven't mentioned that come to mind. I do believe that if you write those things down and if you focus on those things and put yourself in that serotonin state of mind more often than not, you're going to be in a better position. And like I had mentioned, within all these things, you cannot neglect the cortisol version of yourself that would do and will exist from time to time, which is essentially, for me, the pressures of life, right? Being self-critical, being my biggest critic always, and dealing with the stressors of life that will inevitably come. But like I had mentioned, right, the difference between a person who's depressed and well balanced is simply based off of where they place their focus. Where are you placing your focus? Are you focused solely on the cortisol version of yourself? How life is so bad, and I can't imagine I'm being in the situation, maybe being the victim mindset. Everybody gets there, but like I said, are you staying there, right? What your focus is on, and what you act on, that's going to be primarily where you're going to end up, man. If you're focusing and acting on the dopamine version of yourself, just know, like I've mentioned, the vicious cycle that's going to put you back in the cortisol state of mind, it's inevitably going to come because you're not going to be doing all the things that you need to go ahead and do. There's certain things that we want to do, and there's certain things that we need to do. Do the things that you need to do. Do the things, and like I said, these are all things that I believe that I need to do, right? Being in the serotonin state of mind, right? Going on walks, right? Hanging out with the boys. These are things that I need to do. These are things that fill up my cup. How do you personally stay there in the serotonin? Okay, so the way that I would define that is this, right, Chris? Appreciate you for stopping by, my guy. Um, just being mindful. Just being mindful. What is in line with my goals, and how can I enjoy pursuing my goals with the people that I love, right? For me personally, like I said, some of my goals, some of the general goals that I have is character development. And character development could be in the form of helping people out, or building my body, or staying disciplined in a certain aspect, right? Or maybe taking care of my health, right? I try to align all these things and be conscious of the things that I'm going ahead and doing, and that is going to put me in the serotonin state of mind, right? And with that being said, also being very very weary of when I'm choosing or when I'm in a state of acting on the dopamine, right? Am I expending excessive time on my phone? If I am I being distracted? So I mentioned on a previous podcast my morning routine, right? I can tell if I'm going to be in a dopamine, if I'm leaning into the dopamine side of myself, or if I'm leaning into the serotonin side of myself, simply based off of the way that I act, right? Am I being distracted, right? So when I wake up in the morning, I wake up and get right to work. I wake up and lock in immediately, because quite frankly, I do believe that that is where I want to place my focus, and that is what I want to go ahead and act on. So therefore, that is what I act on, right? And I do it with my boy Anthony. I call him every morning, and we get some work done, right? We lock in, do some video editing, do whatever we need to do. That's going to help develop our characters and also develop the skills that we want to go ahead and develop, right? But I also understand that sometimes I'm going to go on my phone, right? I go on my phone, or Anthony goes on his phone. I understand that we're both dipping in, or maybe one of us is dipping into the dopamine side, right? And like I said, that is going to be distracted. That is going to be filled with a bunch of shit that we know that we probably don't need to have, that we don't need to necessarily be focused in on, because quite frankly, it's not aligned with our goals. It's not aligned with the character that we want to go ahead and develop. It is not aligned with the skills that we must develop, right? And that's just what it is. And just be wary of these things. Like I said, maybe. And here's the thing: you also need to be able to balance these things, right? I'm not saying don't do any of these things. I'm not saying don't ever go on your phone. I'm not saying don't ever watch the basketball game. I'm not saying don't ever eat some food that is truly tasting good, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying be wary of these things, right? And like I said, place most of your attentive focus and most of your actions on the serotonin version of yourself, and it's going to give you a better life. It truly is. But you first must define what that looks like. What do all these things look like when you evaluate your daily actions, and maybe when you're doing something that you know is truly wrong, right? But it feels good, which is a lot of things, right? When you're doing something that you know is wrong but feels good, write that up into the dopamine version of yourself and say, I'm dipping into this side. I need to stop this shit, because quite frankly, I already know what's coming, right? And like I mentioned earlier, right? If you're choosing to only do what you want to do, leaning into the dopamine version of yourself, just know the depressive state is on the way, man. It's about 10 minutes out, man. It's 10 minutes out. It's about to pull up right now, man. Inevitably gonna happen. You already know it's gonna be on the way, because it has to. If you're choosing to only do the things in which you want, just know that the things that you're neglecting, that you know you should do, that you value, that guilt from not doing those things is on the way. Inevitably so. So that is how I would answer that question. If you guys have any more questions or comments regarding anything, maybe I said something that you liked, maybe I said something that you didn't like, let me know, and I'll go ahead and end it off here in a few minutes. But yeah, man, I've said pretty much what I needed to say for today's episode. But I want to end it off with this, right? I'm gonna ask you this question, and I mentioned this on a previous podcast before. What are the best problems to have? Which problems would you rather choose, and which problems are better to have, right? So, for example, right, maybe you are neglecting certain things, and for good reason. You're neglecting things that bring you the dopamine, or make you lean into the dopamine version of yourself, right? That is indeed a sacrifice, because something has to give, right? If you want to be a developed character, if you want to be disciplined, hopefully you want to be disciplined. If you want to have a good body, right? If you want to build financial abundance, right? You're going to probably have to do things, and probably have to avoid things as well. But with your course of action and what you place your focus on, it's going to inevitably come with problems, right? So which problems would you rather have? Would you much rather have the problems of neglecting your values, or would you much rather have the problems of the harsh discipline that will be made, and the character that will come from that when you do something that you know you should do, right? There's going to be a lot of things that are going to develop your discipline that maybe are not going to be the most fun things ever, but quite frankly, you know you need to do them, right? So therefore, you must do them. You must say, I don't. You must neglect the way than which you feel right now in the moment. Say, you know what? It's time to lock in, man. It's time to do something that I know is better for me. It's time to weigh it up, man. It's time to weigh it up. What problems do I want? For me personally, it's as simple as this, right? I had this the other day, man. I decided to eat a donut, right? I had two problems. I had two problems that I can go ahead and choose. Two courses of actions that I can go ahead and choose, right? Number one was eat this donut and it tastes good for right now, but I'm going to be kicking my ass later, or neglect the urge to eat a donut. Those are two problems. I know it's a simple silly ass problem, right? It's two problems that I can go ahead and encounter, right? You know what I did? I ate the donut, man. I was kicking my ass for it, man. Like I said, I would much rather deal with the problem of, you know what, man? I know this would feel good. I know this would be very enjoyable, but quite frankly, I need to be disciplined. There are things that I need to focus in on. There's things that I need to lock in with. There's character that I need to develop. There are ways in which I want to be that I need to be, that I need to maintain. And it's as simple as that, right? Of course, it's a silly example, but this can be applied to many different things, right? But you just need to be conscious and weary of these things, because if you're not, you're going to be like most people. And if you don't want to be like most people, because you understand that truly most people are not in a desirable mental state, that's just what I observe. They give themselves the illusion that they're doing good when they could be doing so much better. That's most people. Don't be like those people. Truly be doing things that are going to develop your character. That are actually going to better you. It's just super rare when somebody does this. Like I said, I strive to do it every single day, and that's all you can do, man. Just strive for it, man. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I always get everything right. I'm not saying I'm the most disciplined person. I'm not saying any of that, but I'm saying at the very least, you need to be conscious of the things in which you're doing. And like I mentioned, are you neglecting your values, or are you not neglecting your values? Hopefully you're not, because if you are, like I said, that cortisol version of yourself is going to kick in, man. You're going to be kicking your own ass, man. You're going to be dealing with the stressors of life. You're going to be self-critical, right? You know what? Nobody wants to be in that state of mind. So therefore, act. Yeah, and as simple as that. Most people are addicted to the dopamine. Exactly. That's it's simple. They're slaves to it. They're simply slaves to it. Not only are they addicted, they're slaves. They have no ability to self-govern themselves. They're only doing the things that feel good, man. When you know there are better things that you can go ahead and do. There are better actions that you can go ahead and have. There are better habits that you can go ahead and uphold. There are better character to go ahead and uphold. But are you willing to deal with the problems that will come with that? And most people aren't. That's just the harsh reality of it, right? Everybody wants to be disciplined, but not everybody wants to deal with the problems of being a disciplined person. So therefore they don't. They're undisciplined people, and look at their body. They're a physical representation of a person that's not disciplined, right? And then you look at their mental. They're the mental representation of a person who's not disciplined. What do you value? What do you not value? And like I said, a lot of people, they're simply just slaves. They're just slaves. They're just slaves to it, man. They're addicted and a slave to the dopamine, right? They can't. It's impossible almost in their mind to do something that isn't feeling good, right? You think I want to go to the gym every day, or 5 times a week? You think I want to go to the gym 5 days a week, always? You think I'm ready in the morning, like hell yeah, I can't wait to hit the gym? Some days I am, but some days I'm not. But it doesn't matter, because I understand thoroughly, thoroughly where I want to be and how I need to get there. And it's not a matter of how you feel, because I know at the end of the day, the serotonin will kick in after getting a good workout in with the boy. It's so much better than to not. And it's simple. It's as simple as that, man. So where are you placing your focus? What are you acting on? And that's going to dictate your mental state at the end of the day. That is the difference between people who are depressed and people who are well balanced. Strive to be like the people who are well balanced. Observe what the things in which they do. Observe the differences between the two as well. And you're going to be in a better state, man. Hey, man, I appreciate that, man. I need to hop in your. Hey, man, like I said, let's go ahead and get it set up, man. Let me know, man. Let me know, man. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate everyone stopping by. This was episode 193 of the Life of a Champ podcast, talking about the difference between depressed people and people who are well balanced. Appreciate everyone stopping by. Like I said, if you have any questions or comments regarding today's episode, whether you're rewatching this or watching this live, let me know for sure, and I'll go ahead and respond accordingly. Other than that, I've said everything I need to say, man. I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto. Fellas out here, man, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure y'all work with these motherfuckers because you know that I am and you know that all mine are for sure. So, like I said, tap in with the next podcast. That's going to be on Thursday. I'll be doing more live streams here soon. If there's a certain video or creator that you want me to go ahead and react to, I will look into their content and I will react to it. Tap in with the next live stream. I'm going to do one on Monday, so tap in with that for sure. But other than that, you guys have a good rest of your night. And like I said, tap in with the next live stream. Y'all have a good night.